I started this whole journey in self-development, personal development by enrolling in conscious sexuality. There was just something there. I was like, whoa, my whole body became alive. So I started by really being an intimacy coach and helping people with their sex life, with their non-existent sex life, kind of recognizing that often our way into pleasure is not the way into pleasure that someone else has. I'm an erotic blueprint coach as well. I used to be a former dominatrix. So really learning how to help people through a lot of trauma has been my specialty. There's been a lot of sexual trauma in my life. There's been a lot of sexual trauma in the lives of my couples and of the women and the men that I coach. And we're often not aware of it because, we'll have just shoved it under the carpet, or, our psyche or our body wasn't quite ready to deal with it. So over the course of, the last 15 years, I've really dug deep into conscious sexuality, into all kinds of way of unresolving or unwinding the trauma that's held in our body, in our psyche. I'm a hypnotherapist. I do attunements, spinal attunements, because the emotions are stored in our spine. So I do this, I do energetic frequency. I've been teaching other therapists and coaches different methods, my rapid release, rewire, and restore method, to really get into the psyche and to remove the charge, to remove the energetic frequency that's holding us back from being fully ourselves.
That is a lot. I'm curious. Is there anything in particular that you do that just has your spirit, your passion that you just really love? I mean, I'm sure you love all of it, but is there one component in particular?
You know what? There's one thing that I actually haven't talked about, but that is body shame. And I think a lot of us women have body shame. I work with a lot of men as well on it. But this is one of the things that often holds us back from being intimate, from being sexual, from wanting to show our body, because we have shame. And that might be in deep trauma where someone might have just looked at you in a certain way. We're just going like, oh, you're wearing that? Or, you ate one dessert too many, and your grandmother said, oh, you shouldn't be having that. And that loads into our system, right? And then we see all the beautiful models out there and all the Instagram models and all these influencers, and we compare ourselves. So we're in this realm of comparasitis. Then we want to try and become intimate with someone, or we've been married, and we've kind of felt okay, but then we've had babies and things, have maybe don't look quite as much as they used to be. And then it's like, oh, we judge ourselves. We actually don't have sex. We don't have intimacy. We don't ask for what we don't want, because we're disconnected from this body. So I think it all starts there. And I
Interesting.
love to unravel that with people.
Yeah, because basically what I heard you say is it all starts with ourselves.
Always. Right? I mean, it's funny. So I used to call myself an intimacy coach, and now I'm just like, I'm a self-love, self-relationship expert. Because it's not just a relationship with anyone, but it's once you start having that real relationship to yourself, to your senses, to what your body looks like, what it feels like, the emotions, the body sensations, once you start getting access to all of that, then the world becomes like a completely different world. All of a sudden, it's out of monochrome, it's like super high definition. It's like, whoa, I didn't know that it could be this sensationful. I think there's very often body shame. There's stuff they haven't actually dealt with, and that it's more in their minds than in their partner mind. Their partners is like, I love you anyway, right? But slowly we disconnect from who we are, and then it becomes so difficult to ask for what we want. And second thing is that people don't know what they like. So they're just like, yeah, anything but just not that. So it's like, so so couples used to come to me, and they still do that. They've been together for 25, 30 years, but for the last 15, 20 years they haven't been intimate, they haven't had sex because of life, because of children, because of whatever, right? And so often it is because they don't know what they want. They're afraid to reach out and ask for something because they get rebutted. So they're like, well, doesn't matter. I'm not going to ask again. And that's what it is. And then all of a sudden you have people that haven't had intimacy for like 15, 16, 20 years. And you're like, how important did sex used to be to you? And they're like, oh, we used to love it. I'm like, so what happened here, right? And it's really getting to the communication part. So for me, the first thing is like, okay, let's take sex off the table. For the next 3 weeks, definitely no sex. And they're like, yeah, that's easy because we haven't had sex for 15 years. I'm like, great, but I'm not actually telling you that you can't have it. And you know how the mind is, right? When you tell them not to do something, it's like, oh, now
Yeah.
it becomes kind of like kinky, a little bit like, oh, taboo, I can do it. So what I teach them is really communication. So I have a course called Scrumptious Communication, and it all starts with communicating, right? We communicate to ourselves, we communicate to the universe, we communicate to each other, the way we look at each other, the way we shrug our shoulders, the way we look up and down. All of that is a communication. And what we really want is to be heard, seen, and understood. So I take them through this exercise where I just say, listen, put a timer on for 15 minutes and we're going to ask 3 questions. And you're not going to have to agree with the other person. You're not going to have to like what they say. But the only aim of this exercise is that you've understood what they've communicated to you. And then when you do, you say thank you. And then we switch. They're like, that easy. I'm like, yes, but it means that in the beginning you'll be surface swimming. You'll be like, yeah. So one of the things would be like, tell me what you love about me. And they'll be like, oh, I love your hair and you're this and you're that. And say thank you. And then we ping pong and you'll say, tell me what you love about me. And I would say, well, I love the way that you bring me coffee in the morning. And then you'll notice, like, after you do about 5 ping pongs on that question, it's like, oh, we're starting to get a bit deeper and we're starting to actually excavate what's really going on here. And then I give them usually 3 different questions. And in the beginning, they're like, but that's so boring. It's the same question again and again and again. I'm like, yes, it's boring, but you probably have never felt as seen or as heard by your spouse, by your partner, by your lover that you have now. And people come away from this and they're like, oh my God, I never knew this about about us.
You said a few things that really stood out to me. Let's go to what you just ended on, which is people really are wanting to feel seen and heard and understood. And sometimes, I think many times, they don't even know that that's what they're after.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, looking at it through the lens of Live Jasmine, where we're from and what we see, I've interviewed hundreds of Live Jasmine members at this point and
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of models. And one thing that the models tell me and the members tell me, not in the direct words, but the models all say they just want to be heard. They just want to
Mm-hmm.
be seen. And if you think about it, Live Jasmine, it's a campsite, but there is sexual free porn online. They're not paying
Everywhere.
everywhere. It's on the internet, it's on social media, it's everywhere. You can meet up with someone from Tinder. I mean, but they're paying by the minute for an interaction. So there's
Mm-hmm.
something deeper that's getting met there. And what the models tell me and what the members will say, well, she just listens to me. She just gets me. And again, it's this deeper need that I think we all have. Where, some people are meeting it or not meeting it on varying levels, but to be seen and heard. And we don't even realize that that is the deeper need.
But that's always a deeper need, right? To be seen, heard, understood, and ultimately to be loved. They may not be looking to the models to be loved, but they're definitely, you know, wanting to be seen, heard, and understood. And there's also something in the mind, like if we go to a therapist, if we pay for a model on this site, right? If we go to a coach, we know that we're actually paying for their time and that they're going to be unbiased and they're going to be listening to us. Not the same way that our partner or our boyfriend or our girlfriend or whoever it is, non-binary, they may not have the bandwidth to even listen to us at that point. And I've noticed that when I used to Dom, I used to have all these really high executives, so very high, like one of the top CEOs from all over the world. And the one thing that they wanted, because it would never be sexual, it was always like, just doming, but they'd say, okay, we want to meet in a restaurant. You take our wallet, you take my wallet, and then you make sure that the maitre d' and the waiters know that I am not in charge. They just wanted someone else to take over and to be held, to be like, okay, she's taking over. And it wouldn't be cruel or anything, but it was just like, okay, I'm taking over for a few hours. You can just be.
It's almost like they want that break in their
Hmm.
life because they are in charge of so many other things
Always. Yeah.
and so full of responsibilities that having an experience where someone else is completely in control, it's probably relieving for them in some way.
It is, and I've noticed in the BDSM world where if you if you think about babies, when they can't move, we swaddle them, right? When they cry a lot, we swaddle them. So this is what you can do with ropes as well. You can actually just have people feel really tied
Wow.
up. And what happens in the nervous system relaxes and it can actually breathe better. So the way that I've used BDSM is really to release trauma in men and women and couples, and you just see where it's all like, oh my god, I can actually reach these states. You can reach these ecstatic states by being held by someone understanding what's going on in my nervous system and my psyche and everything. And this is what I feel most people are looking for. They're looking to be held. They're looking to bring out what's on the inside, but they're looking to bring that out in a safe space, that they don't get criticized, that they don't get ridiculed, but that they can actually bring that out.
That's really interesting to me that you said when you were in that space, the BDSM, kink, and Dom, you were actually able to, even using the example of the rope to make someone feel swaddled, which
Mm-hmm.
does mean if someone's having a panic attack and, they say like just even holding yourself tight or having someone else hold you tight, like squeezing is extremely, it calms, like you said, the nervous system. I interviewed a trauma specialist. She actually created a sex toy line. Dr. Eve is her pseudo name. But she said that when someone has a trauma from childhood, which is where many of our traumas originate from,
Yep.
yeah, around not feeling heard or seen or understood, and then they somehow encounter a place where that trauma gets held and accepted and seen and heard or understood, she said it actually rewires the brain in that place.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Completely. Isn't it cool? Our brains can actually rewire like this. And this is why I love this work, because you don't have to hold on to this stuff. You may have, we even see it on babies that have been born prematurely, been put in incubators and haven't gotten touched the first few months of their life. A lot of studies have shown that if they don't get it for the rest of their lives, they turn out to be delinquents and they have all kinds of problems. There's been loads of studies on it. But then actually, if they do receive touch, they are a very different person. They grow up to be successful, and it's I had never realized that how important it is to be touched and how important it is that we can rewire our brain is just has these neural pathways that we can create new ones, and that we don't have to keep stuck in that same trigger that keeps triggering us, that keep going, oh. And then it's like, oh, all of a sudden, but you'll notice that it's rewired, where you'll do the same pattern and there's no response in your body, and it's just like, oh, okay, that's all right now.
Mhm. And what a hopeful message for people that have really gone through trauma to know this can be rewired. You're not stuck in this suffering.
Yeah.
Something else you said that I want to go back to is that most of the people you work with, in your experience of working with clients, many of them do not even know what they like sexually.
That is correct.
I want to talk about that because I think that that is one of the big issues, I think, throughout the world. I always, this project has opened my eyes doing so many interviews and talking to so many people and realizing, you know what? Yeah, we're not encouraged. Like, we're encouraged to figure out what we like in life, our hobbies, the types of food we like, but we don't really get permission to explore our sexualities unless you had someone who was really kind of aware and gave you that permission. But in general, we're not getting it. And we're, in fact, given sometimes a spoken or unspoken message that exploring your sexuality is dangerous and you definitely
Mhm.
shouldn't do it unless you fit certain parameters that have been deemed okay. You're
Isn't
married.
it funny?
Yeah.
Right, but it all boils down to what was our education? What was our sexual education? What did our parents tell us about it? Because these are all beliefs that anchor in, that right, that load into us. It's like, what did our parents tell us? What did the schools tell us? What did our religion? Where in the world did you grow up? What were you shown? You know, when you saw like little mini skirts on and boobs on display, was it said like, oh my God, she's asking for it? Right? All these things that we don't really know, but we're keeping, this is all in our subconscious, but they are keeping us from even trying to look at what did we want. I remember I came and moved to the UK. I'm Dutch, and my kids were small, and then I had two boys, and one of them used to run around naked, and he loved it. And then he'd get like an erection. He's like, "Mommy, my willy is hard. I've got a hard willy. Look, I'm doing willy massage." And I was like, "Maybe cool here, but if you're going to go to school, it's like not something that you do in front of everyone else." So I just had to kind of like explain to him not that nothing is wrong, but you just have to kind of see where you can do this and where you can't. And then I had twin daughters after my two boys. And I asked my husband's cousin, I'm like, "So what do you call vagina here?" And she's like, "Front bottom." I'm like, "So you've got a back bottom and a front bottom." I'm like, "Okay, that's a little bit confusing." But so I remember talking to a journalist a few years ago, and I'm like, the ridiculousness that we don't actually call a vulva or a vagina. Penis is okay or willy is okay, but why can't we call the body parts what they are? It's like, yeah, we have a real issue with that. So that loads in. So can you imagine then, getting your period and trying to see what you like? I remember my twins, one of my daughters always had her hand just on her pussy, on her vulva, and that just felt comfortable to her. And I remember that I used to do this, but my parents said, "No, don't do that." And then you get all the religious stuff or whatever it is. It's like, no, you don't want to do that. So for me, I just saw her doing it and like had her finger and her thumb in her mouth, and no, just have it there to like, it just grounded her. And if we actually know from Tantra and stuff, that's often how you ground yourself, by just putting your hand there, right? So it's been such an interesting journey to see that people don't, first of all, don't know their body very well. Then they don't know what they are experiencing as sensations. So I take them through a whole sensations thing. I'm like, okay, what's a temperature? Can you feel a temperature? Can you feel an expansion or a contraction? Is it warm? Is it cold? Is it buttery? Can you give it a quality? And they're all looking at me like, what do you mean? I just feel like something. I'm like, okay, well, let's describe that something. And like, well, I feel numb. I'm like, great. So you don't feel much there. So it's still a sensation, that it's an absence of sensation. So that's like how I go into it. And then, of course, I'm also an erotic blueprint coach. So that really teaches you the 5 ways into pleasure, just like the 5 love languages. How do you receive pleasure? And it's as simple as really slowing down and noticing what kind of touch do you like. I take people through a whole game, an A-B game. What, you know, and we'll try all the different touch on an arm, and then we'll move to a leg, and then we don't ever touch the genitals because, yeah, I want to have them drop into their body what it feels like before in the rest of their body.
I love that. I really love that. And because it makes you more present. And I think that that
Mm-hmm.
is our pushing away of pleasure and our sexuality, I think is one of the main reasons that we are not present, because what you just described, like the sensations and really being in your senses, that can create a lot of stimulation, a lot of pleasure. But when you're rejecting that, then you get, I think, really lost in the mind and you're thinking about, I need to do this and I need to do that. And that's how so many people are living. Um,
Completely. And that's the beauty of the erotic blueprints, right? Because we have 5 different blueprints, and the energetic, very much like when you come into a room, some of you might be highly sensitive. You come into a room, you're like, whoa, a lot of negativity. I don't want to come in. Or you come into a house and you're like, oh my God, this feels like home. It's like I've been here before. You know, or some person comes up to you and wants to hug you immediately, and you're like, whoa, I need a bit of space. So that's what we call the energetic. But at the same time, the energetic can also flirt with you across the room, can feel the energy, can have like full body orgasms without being touched. But at the same time, if you come too fast at them, they're like, yo, no, you know, it shuts down that whole pleasure center. Then you have the sensual, and they like, you know, like soft silk shirts and scarves and candles, and going slow and using their senses. And oftentimes, like when they're eating a fruit, they'll just like moan and like, oh, you know, they love pleasure, like food, hear things, dance things. But their shadow side, because each one has a shadow side as well. Shadow side is that they go into their head all the time. So it's like, oh my God, did I shave down there? There are dirty socks on the floor. I can't get into my body. It's like, oh no, he smells a little bit, no, it's a bit funky. And we get this whole like that we can't drop into our body. But once you start knowing about each other's blueprint into pleasure, then it becomes so much easier, because then you can set up the space and like, okay, you know, let's take 5 minutes to clean up the room, to have it feel really good. Maybe we put a few candles down. And for a sexual, it's like, no, we want to go really fast. You know, we want orgasm. It's like talking about breast and boobs and cock and pussy. And there's a lot of shame that it goes so quickly for them, or that, you know, they can get off really quickly, which is if they're with, say, a sensual or an energetic person, then they feel they always have to slow down and they might not get to their needs met. And then we have kinky, which is anything that might be taboo. So it might be just getting undressed in front of your partner or in front of a window with lights on, or it could be psychological kink, talking down to someone, or, you know, the dom, the sub type. There could be impact play. But there often is so much shame around this, not being able to tell your partner that this is actually what you want. And then the 5th type is a shapeshifter and loves all of it, but is often really starved because they're not with someone who matches them. So they often play in only one of the other types. But it's like once you start revealing this and you start playing around with the body with the different kind of touch for each blueprint, and it's like, whoa, this is a lot of cool information. It's like my body is responding in a way which I never thought possible.
I'm like, I need to study this more because um I've heard the 5 types before, but only one other time. So I don't know as much. Obviously, I think we've all heard so much about the 5 languages of love, which This information is so helpful because, like with the five love languages, if you know how you understand that you're being loved and you can share that information or somehow give it to yourself or whatever, and you understand that about the people around you. Okay, well, I know, my partner, my mom, it doesn't matter who, but they really feel loved when I give them gifts. So let me just get a
Mm-hmm.
little something or whatever the case is. It makes life more rich. You mentioned earlier about Tantra,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd love to talk about that. Will you define, because I know Tantra is ancient, I know that this is thousands of years old. Will you define Tantra for us? What is it?
Oh, so many different ways of explaining it, right? So for me, Tantra is really the connection through the body with self and the divine. Yeah. Um, and that we can access it by using pleasure and by using breath work, using movement, that we can actually get to heightened states. And then Tantra, a lot of Tantra is being used for manifestation. A lot of it is, there's some not sexual Tantra at all. It's just the breath work and it's the moving of the energy centers, right? How we move the energy up and down our body. And it's really cool when you learn how to open all the energy centers. It becomes kind of like a super highway. And you start feeling sensations all the way up and down, and then also it feels like almost like you're a beaming out all this electricity and then receiving and magnify. You're like a magnet pulling things to you. But it could be as simple as actually sitting in front of each other and just opening your heart and looking at your eyes and just softening a little bit. And what do you see? And it could be, because I also used to do orgasm meditation, but it would be something like a noticing step. What do I notice about you? And it's like, I notice that you have brown eyes, and they go down at the end of your eye a little bit. The lashes are beautiful and long, and your face is very smooth. You have full lips. Your hand is holding your face. There's a bit of an upturned smile there. It's basically seeing someone.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And you then receive it. And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I can receive this.
Yeah, that's really beautiful because it's like a deep presence with someone.
Yeah. And again, we're going back to it. The cam girls and the clients, we want to be present. We want to be seen.
I think, again, exactly. That's one of the biggest reasons this industry is so successful because in many cases, models who are doing their job very well are making people feel very seen and they're very present with them. Because we know even people that live with us, our partners, people in our day to day life, we're all so busy and rushing. And even if we're having a discussion, we may also be answering emails and on the phone, and that presence isn't there. But
Mm-hmm.
when you're in an environment where someone is focused on you, and even just I got a taste of it a second ago when you just described my face because you were present with me, I can see how that's deeply healing for some people. Absolutely.
And exactly like you said, because we've all had moms and dads and partners that have been busy. We've been busy. I know me as a mom, 4 kids in under 3 years' time was it was kind of like it was tough. So I'd be doing things and I didn't always pay them as much attention if, now in hindsight and knowing what I know now, I'm like, oh, okay, great. I know I help people with this and then I know what I've done to my kids. But basically I spend a lot of time with them saying, hey, mommy didn't always know either. So, but we know that we're not always present, and just to come back to presence. That is what it is. Even if you can just have a few minutes a day where you can come back to presence, where you can be in communion with someone, where you can be in that intimate relationship by just looking at them. You don't have to even talk about sex. And oftentimes these women are like therapists, like coaches, because they get asked questions about how to do certain things. Is this normal? I mean, so many people have questions. Like every time that I go on a big panel, they're like, "Oh my God, I have this and this. Is that normal?" Or my vagina discharges, or I can't get an erection when it's this and this and that. What do I do? It's like, first of all, let's just take a breath and really recognize that how difficult it was for you to say that. So thank you. And if you can just thank people for their honesty and again, relax their nervous system a little bit. It's like, I say, hey, untighten that butthole because it's very clenched. If you can unclench it and just take a breath there, it's like, okay, you actually came with a very deep question. So let's just peel it back. And there's no shame, there's no blame, there's no guilt, there's nothing. Let's just see how we can be curious and how we can answer it in a way that it lands for you. Because I might answer something and you might not understand, and you'll be like, okay, so what did you understand there? And that's where that dyad, that communication tool that I gave you, it's like thank you if you understand, or otherwise it's like, can you deepen a little bit more? Can you clarify?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you, because you have so much experience basically dealing with people's sexuality in
Mm.
many different ways, clients, you were a Dom, giving speeches, I'm sure even things we haven't discussed. What would you say, with that experience and knowledge, is one of the biggest misconceptions or misunderstandings that you see that people tend to have around sex that just aren't true?
Sex is dirty and it's bad, and it's only certain people have sex. And sex can be from kind of like animalistic, which for some people is like incredible, to massively spiritual, and anything in between. And I think when we get the religious dogma, like no sex before marriage, and you have to be a virgin, you have to do it a certain way, or where even now young adults look at a lot of porn. With my four kids, I had to talk them through. This is porn. This is people that get paid for it. This is not how you have to have sex with your boyfriend, girlfriend. When my boys started having sex, I bought them condoms. I said, each girl that you're going to be with has parents, has brothers and sisters. How would you like it if your sisters get talked about, or if someone would talk about your sister in a denigrating way? So they really understood that to really value who they are with, and not to just spread stuff around. Because this is really where I've seen that there's been such a growth thing, where it's like, oh well, they all do it this way. I'm like, you don't have to be pressured into anything. You can say no, and you can say, hey, can we hold on a minute?
Yeah.
There's such a like quick. We have to do it this way, and this, and then let's put some toys in, and this is add. And for me, it's like, let's actually take all those toys away for a moment, feel, take a breath, be curious, and that's like, oh, what's possible now? And then you can add things to it if you want to, or not.
Right. And that makes for a more authentic and meaningful experience anyway. Um, the models, we have over 100 Jasmin millionaires, girls that have
Oh
been
wow.
millionaires from camming from Jasmin alone. They're exclusive on
Mm-hmm.
Jasmin. And I interview them and I'll ask them, what's the key to success? All of them have told me one of the things. There's a few things, but they all say, well, I don't do anything I don't want to do.
Completely.
And there's this, and it's like, okay, if she or he is not doing anything, they're not doing anything they don't want to do, then that means that what they are doing, they want to do, and they're probably enjoying it. And
They're in
that
their full authenticity, right? They're in their
exactly.
sovereignty, in their authenticity.
And someone else can feel that and enjoy that,
Completely.
you know? And like you said, it's not this, okay, now you do this and I do this and get this toy and then this happens, like, which is, it's a turnoff.
Completely, right? And it's like, oh, or like a little checklist. This has to happen, and then that. Okay, then we're done. Perfect, excellent. Here you go. Here's your money. It's like,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. And they don't do anything they don't want to do. They all are very clear with their boundaries, how they allow people to
Mhm.
treat them or not treat them. And someone might think, oh, if they're Jasmine millionaires, they're doing everything. No,
No,
no.
but you never know what people get turned on by. And some people just want that speaking together.
Oh,
Some
yeah.
people like looking at toes. Some people like whatever, like shoulders. You know, you don't have to show everything or do everything. It's create your niche, find out what works for you. And
Absolutely.
then you will attract the people that it attracts.
If you could give one message to everyone in the world about human sexuality, what would you give them? What message?
Ah, that's such a good one. I would really tell them to slow down. Slow down. Be. Really be curious about how you like to be touched. You know, what would you like? I mean, I have this like fork. I always have it here because yeah, it's a normal implement, right? People have a fork. Okay, this is a big meat fork, but you could be any kind of metal fork or a spoon, and just stroke it on your hand. Not too hard. It's like, oh, do you like that? On a scale of 1 to 10, yeah, it's kind of all right. And then move it the other way around. A bit more pressure. Do you like that more? And the other side of the hand. Ooh, that's interesting. That's a bit more sensationful. Start playing around. You can use just normal implements like that. You can use your nails, you can use scents. Really start noticing where are your erogenous zones. Where are the zones that you love? Like for me, it's my wrist. It's the inside of my elbow. It's next to my neck. Start playing around. Be curious about yourself. And if you're with a partner, start being curious about what turns them on and recognize that it might not always be the same.
Right.
Be authentic, be yourself, and have fun. For goodness sake, just have fun. It doesn't have to be so serious.
I think that's one of the biggest things we're all missing these days is to just, it's okay. You know, it's still allowed to have fun. We're allowed to have fun and indulge in pleasure.
Completely. And this is like the bit that people just like, but pleasure, it has to be sexual. I'm like, no, pleasure can just be like, you know, you smell a candle, that gives you pleasure. Yeah, you have someone brush your hair, you brush your hair yourself. What is it that creates that joy in you, that creates that, I call it scrumptiousness. My podcast is called The Scrumptious Woman. So, you know, that is for me that life force. How can you feel scrumptious? How can you just feel alive and have fun? And it really doesn't need to be difficult.
I actually am really looking forward to listening to some of your episodes because you're someone who I can tell is really embodying these things and living that truth. And you really are clearly connected to your pleasure. Why do you think we as a culture, as a society, are so uncomfortable with pleasure?
Right? I mean, my Instagram accounts and stuff get banned when I use the word pleasure, hence the word scrumptious. Um,
Does it really?
oh yeah, oh my God, I've gotten kicked off Facebook and Instagram once or twice. And I don't use the word sex even that much, right? But it's like sensuality, pleasure, yeah, anything with pleasure. I mean, even email, you know, email providers just shut us down. It's like
Wow.
we're actually teaching. people how to have a better life, how to enjoy life more. I think there's a lot of stigma. And again, what were you taught about pleasure? Yeah, what was your upbringing? And once we can just start looking at that and we can start unwinding those cross wires, because that's what it is, right? They've been wired into our brain a certain way, and we can just use different methods. You know, there's EFT, there's NLP, there's all kinds of my things that I do. There's hundreds, there's energy work, there's hundreds of different ways to untangle that and then to rewire. And it's like, oh, pleasure is our natural way of being. Because if we look at babies, they're like sponges, right? A baby doesn't think that they're too much. They're unlovable, they're this, they're that. And at the core of us adults, those are our core wounds, right? We're unlovable, we're too much. People don't understand us. But a baby, if you just look at a baby or a puppy, bouncing around, having fun, squealing, you can't help but laugh at this and smile and just feel that joy. And that is what I love to connect people back to. Even if it's just for a little bit, like every day, just a tiny little bit so you can connect back to your joy. Because life can get a hella tough, right? And it's just like you only see what's happening, and especially now in the world with wars and just people dying left, right, and center. It's like, oh, we take all of that on and we disconnect from that sense of joy, that sense of purpose, that perfection that we are when we are small.
I want to ask you just quickly about your thoughts on the healing power of female sexuality.
I think there's a lot of healing there to be done. I think not to be done, but to be had. You know, there's a lot of conditioning there, and I've noticed that it's so healing when women come together in groups and they talk about pussies and breasts and feelings and emotions and actually let it all hang out and talk about like periods and menopause and yeah, how to deal with men. We used to cook together. We used to live in tents and we used to, massage each other and be with each other. And all these tales would be passed down from female to female. And then we cooked together and did a lot of things. And now that we're in our little concrete and glass boxes, we don't have that so much. We don't have that community so much anymore. And all um, the rituals and really the working with the earth and the working with our bodies, that has gotten lost a little bit. And I've noticed like after COVID, people are dying to be together again. And that's why female group sexuality really, really works. And it's empowering. It's our power center. It's really where the root and um, the sacral chakra, that's where we have all of our power. That's where the babies come from, but that's also where we bring power up through our whole body through that. And once we can really tap into that female sexuality and do that in a community where it's not just one person, bringing it alive, but then we all start turning on, and then the whole world all of a sudden is like, whoa, there's a lot of women here that are powerful and that are changing the world and that are creating the lives that they want.
When you were talking about how we used to do this, women used to come together and it's very powerful. It's very healing. I think they were called red tents,
Mm-hmm.
tents
Exactly.
where we would all come together and take care of each other when we were giving birth or menstruating or going through menopause or having issues with the husband or whatever. We were together in the red tents. And we've like lost a lot of that, and I just wonder how that has impacted us. Because you're right, when we come together, it becomes a very powerful force and it can be a very healing force.
Mm-hmm. And there's also a part of that, like the tribe, right? So we are we're tribal people. We that's how we used to live. Then there was also the fear of rejection. So if you would do something to shame the tribe, say, you'd be rejected, and there was the fear of death. So
Right.
that, if you all of a sudden you get out, you're out in wherever in nature somewhere, then you have no food, no shelter, nothing. So that really loaded in. And that's where people wanted to then, disconnect from it. But the beauty is that now with online work and with the models that you're saying is we can recreate women's groups, men's circles, non-binary stuff, but we can recreate this stuff so that we can actually have a connection again.
Very well said. Is there anything about your work, human sexuality, human connection that we didn't talk about, but you want to share?
What else is there? I mean, there's always so much. I think the deepest, if we look at the core of us, our deepest wounding is where we're not being met by someone else. And we'll constantly keep searching for that. And unless we can start giving ourselves that by exploring pleasure, by exploring what our no's and our yeses are, by exploring different kinds of touch, by exploring saying no to someone when we don't want to go somewhere without a reason. When we start feeling that, that is then we start connecting to ourselves. And then it's really easy to connect to someone else. So that it starts creating an interdependence and no codependence because we've seen a lot of codependence the last few years.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, it is everywhere. It is rampant. Yes, I love that point of this place in you that needs to be met. I love that you're giving the reminder that we ourselves have the power to meet that place too. We don't have to depend on a partner or a friend or whatever it is to meet that in us. Like, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to suffer until he or she gets their act together. No, explore your own pleasure, explore what brings you joy, bring those things to yourself. And that gives, I think, back our power too.
Completely. This is one of the things like I love to solo date. I love to take myself on a solo date and I do this about once a week. And it doesn't need to be at night. Sometimes it's I go out for breakfast, sometimes I go out for a walk, sometimes whatever. I go bowling, ice skating, whatever. But it's really that time to connect with myself every day. I solo date myself, but it might be journaling, it might be dancing, it might be taking a bath, it might just be rubbing some beautiful oil or cream into my face, but it's really it's like I have some time with me every day so that I can kind of like ask my soul, ask my inner beings like, hey, what do you need here? And sometimes it's whispering and sometimes it's fucking screaming at you like I want this, and it can be like a little child. It's like I want you to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
all right. It's like, okay, there, I hear you. I hear
Mhm.
you. I'm going to slow down and actually just take a breath. Take 90 seconds to breathe, to notice what's going on in you. And everyone has 90 seconds once or twice a day that they can check in with themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And if you don't, you need a full 20 minutes. If you don't have 90 seconds, make sure you're taking 20 minutes because, yeah,
And that's it, right? It's like self care and pleasure doesn't need to be on a to do list. But when you have kids and stuff, I would say schedule it in because otherwise it's going to get lost.
yeah, yeah. And many times then so will you.
Yeah, I make that a non-negotiable. Just like, no, this is my time. Like I don't talk to clients before 10 o'clock. I know there's one session a month that I do at 7 o'clock with Australia, but that's fine. Yeah, because I know that's once a month. And for the rest of the time, it's like, no, not before 10 o'clock, and usually not after 6:30.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah, some boundaries, some just some rules. It's just boundaries for me are a way. How do I show other people how to love me and how to be with me?
again, kind of going back to this relationship model between Live Jasmine model and Live Jasmine member, one of the things that I think is so bonding between them is the fact, and by the way, I've interviewed members who they talk to the same model for 18 years, 15 years, 10 years. That is the norm when I'm doing interviews, is they have
Wow.
same model for many years. And I think it's this explicit communication that happens because they're
Hmm.
not in person. In order for their needs to be met, they have to be very clear about what they want, what they don't want. The model is very clear about what she's willing to do, what she's not. And then they come together and have an experience. And that very clear communication, I think, is so bonding for people and makes people feel safe. And
Completely. It's
yeah.
a negotiation, right? If it's I want this, the model says, what about this? It's like, oh, okay, yeah, that feels good. Can we tweak that a little bit? And like, she'll be like, I might want to do that instead. And it's like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, that would feel really good. I hadn't thought about that. But this is what it is. It's just a communication. It's we kind of like barter with each other, and we kind of think like we adjust. It's like, oh, this felt good this time, but let's look at how we can bring in more, whatever it is. And it's just being open, being curious enough to kind of, and also notice that every time it might change. You might say, yeah, last time I said yes, but this time I'm a definite no.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. This has been a beautiful interview.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Let's say for anyone listening who's like, okay, yeah, I actually don't know what I like. I'm very disconnected from my pleasure and from myself, and from my partner. What are some baby practical steps that someone can take to kind of come back to their pleasure, come back to themselves?
Good one. So I would say put a timer on for 90 seconds. Take a breath, close your eyes for a minute. Just take a breath and notice where that breath lands in your body. And really start to be aware, is there a temperature there? Where is the temperature? Does it change? Does it have maybe a shape? And really start becoming aware of what is happening in your body. And then you'll probably have a thought with it. And allow yourself to think that thought. An image might come up. Allow yourself to see that image. And then an emotion will come up. And you might judge yourself. Whatever, take a breath there because breath is really important. Take breath in through your nose, exhale through your mouth, and then notice what else comes up. And it's those four elements: the image, thought, body sensation, and emotion. That is what any experience is made up out of. So if we can just slow it down enough to really state those four elements, then we move through something. And when we duplicate through something, we move through it, then the charge, like the negativity or the positivity or all of that kind of gets dissolved. And we're like, oh, now we're open to what else is possible. Another thing that I love is putting your thumb and your forefinger together really slowly, really softly, and see if you can feel the ridges of your fingerprints. Go that slowly. And then notice what it feels like for your thumb to receive, what the warmth is, what it feels like for your finger, the other finger, to give that touch to your thumb. And just be curious. Because some people just go fast. And it's like, no, slow down. Slow down till you can almost feel them together. Do you feel them together when you pull away slightly, when there's a few millimeters between them? Can you still feel the heat? Do you feel nothing? Some people feel it much more when you pull further away, when you take them apart. It's like, oh, I feel more sensation there. It's like buzzing. And some people are like, no, I like it much closer together. And some it's like, oh, it kind of it's like magnets, but they're like they don't want to pull together, but they want to repel. And just start noticing that this is all information. It's neither good nor bad, but it's just all information, and your brain can start to play with that information. It's like, oh, if that's like that just on my fingertips, what would it be like if I start trying stuff on my body like this as well?
That was beautiful. As I was following along and doing it myself, and it's incredible how exhilarating that little touch is when you're really present with it, and how much it really sucks you into this moment right here, right now, like super present.
That's it. That's all we want to do, right? Be here, right now.
That's it. I'm not, yeah, I don't want the past or the future, just right here, right now.
And I think that's one thing with fantasy, when people want to go into fantasy, they get so pulled into it. And it's like great fantasy and then come back to their present and try and link them then.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Yes.